أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على خير المرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم سبحانك اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. So in the last few lessons we have been talking about the transfer of property that does not involve buying and selling, but other ways in which property is transferred, whether it's use or whether the actual ayn, the property itself. So I think last week we talked about waqfs and we talked about gifts, and we talked also about rahan, which is when things are used as security or collateral by somebody or held as on mortgage, as it were. Not in the modern sense of mortgage. So now we're moving on to another type, which is very familiar to everyone, which is probably one of the most common ways that the use of an object is transferred from one person to another. And that's what's called in Arabic ariya. Ariya, which is simply the loan of an object to somebody for them to use it for themselves for usually a set period of time. But it might be until a job is completed, or it might be for a set period of time, or it might be even without any particular limit being attached to it in terms of time. So this is similar to qard, but qard is usually with money, and it is returned in like rather than the very same thing being returned. The object itself is returned. The person's not returning a similar object. So he says here, wal ariya mu'addat. So this word mu'addat here, he says in this particular context, it means something which is given away to be taken back. Mu'addat. So something which is given away to somebody, but with the intention of getting it back at a later point. He says, يضمن ما يغاب عليه. So the person who is given this object, the borrower of this object, he is liable financially for any objects that he takes out of sight of the buyer. What he means by that, not necessarily, I mean, he might take them out of sight, but objects of the type that are taken out of sight, small objects, things that you put in your pocket or you take into your house, such as jewelry, clothing, things of that nature. No. So if you take something with you out of sight, and then you come back to the buyer and say, look, that thing, was struck by lightning and burnt to pieces. Or somebody came in the night and stole the jewelry that you lent me for my wedding, or whatever it might be, then his word is not accepted unless he can prove that happened. Because if he can prove that it happened, then the liability does go back. But if he can't prove it, then he has to pay for it and he has to replace it. So this is the general rule with a lot of various things, that basically this type of liability is, what he means by liability here is that the burden of proof is on that person in his claim, and he is not believed when he claims that something happened to it. That's what we mean by liable. So he has to replace it. He's financially liable. وَلَا يَضْمَنُ, but he is not liable مَا لَا يُغَابُ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ عَبْدٍ أَوْ دَابَّةٍ or darin or anything like that. He is not liable for anything else that is not taken out of view, such as, he says, slaves. Okay, you may take a slave into your house, but slave is not the same thing as an object. Or an animal. You may take an animal into a place where animals live, but it's not considered to be the same as some small thing that you can pocket. And because if you are to run away with a slave and pretend that the slave has been stolen, that's much more obvious to find out for an animal than it is with a small object, basically. Or a house, something like that, or a piece of land, or a tree. All of these types of things, basically, you're not liable under any circumstance, and the burden of proof is not on you. If you say that the tree burnt down or the slave was killed by a robber, then your word is usually accepted, unless there are qara'in al-ahwal, there are circumstantial evidence that show that you are lying. Whether that is somebody having seen the slave after the time that you claimed that he had perished, or seen you riding the animal a day after you said that the animal had been stolen. So basically, but generally speaking, the rule is if it's something that's taken outside, you're liable, otherwise you're not. You become liable, though, if you abuse or use these things in a way that you are not. So if you borrow a horse and then you borrow a slave whose speciality is copying out manuscripts, and then you force him to do manual labor for you, for which he's ill-equipped, and the slave dies as a result, then you're liable. Similarly, if you borrow a cow and then use it to ride to work on, that's not the use that a cow is typically put to. So you would be liable. So even though he says you're not liable, you do become liable if you abuse it or use it in a way which constitutes what's called in Arabic ta'addi, going beyond the limits of the prescribed usage of that thing. Then we move on to the next one, which is, again, something leaving the possession of one person temporarily and going into the possession of another person. But this time it is not for the purpose of the use of that person, but it is for safekeeping only. So there are two words in Arabic which refer to this. One is amana and one is wadi'a. They both mean the same thing, basically. So this bab is called wadi'a, and it's when you give something over to somebody for that person to look after it for you. Generally speaking, this was done for free by Muslims, for other Muslims, but sometimes, people will be paid to do this as well as a service. But when you do that for a person, that person is trusted fully. He's considered an ameen. The only reason you would pick that person is because you have some level of degree of trust in him. So if he says something, his word is taken in terms of what happened to the thing that you left with him. Again, unless there is obvious circumstantial evidence that showcases that he was not fully telling the truth. So he says, "Wal muda in qal." So he's giving one example of some circumstances. So if you, I have, let's say, 1,000 dinars, and I want to keep them safe, so I hand them to you, and say, "Please look after them for me." Maybe you'll be charging me to do that, but I'll leave them in your possession. And then you come back and you say to the qadi, I returned them to him. He says here, "Wal muda in qal," if the person with whom it is left says, "Radadtul wadi'ah ilayk," I returned the thing that you left with me on trust to you, suddiqa, he's believed. His word is taken. Illa an yakuna qabidaha bi ishhad, except if when you handed them to him, you had that done before witnesses. So basically, the rule here is if somebody is an ameen, you trust them, he's basically believed under pretty much every circumstance, except if you showed that you didn't fully trust him. And if you showed that you didn't fully trust him by saying, "Right, I will give you my 1,000 dinars to look after, but I'm going to get Ahmed and Abdullah to come and witness me handing them over to you." Yeah. So Ahmed and Abdullah come, they witness it. And then when you come and say, "Look, I gave them back to you," I said, "No, you didn't." In this case, your word is not believed, because I took the precaution of having witnesses when I gave them to you. The only way then for you to give them back to me and be believed is if you also do it with witnesses. So this is a general rule. If something starts with witnesses, then the burden of proof changes, and it can only be removed from you, any sort of belief in you, if you also provide witnesses. That's a general rule here. وَإِنْ قَالَ ذَهَبَتْ فَهُوَ مُصَدَّقٌ بِكُلِّ حَالٍ. That's in terms of returning it. But if I hand them to you with witnesses, I get Ahmed and Abdullah to come along, I give you my 1,000 dinars, and then you say, "They've disappeared. Don't know what happened to them." Or, "I came back one night and they were gone." I mean, if you say that, then he says here, you're believed in every set of circumstances, because you are an ameen. So the only thing that you have control over as the depositor is the act of depositing and whether it's returned or not. Otherwise, once you've chosen him, he is trusted in everything that he says, apart from in the act of returning them to you, if you had that witnessed. This is a general rule with people who are Amin. Trust was an important underpinning of transactions in general, but specifically transactions where people are looking after things for you. I mean, in fact, if we want to restore mu'amalat properly, the first thing we need to start with is restoring trust among people. I mean, there are tools whereby we can do that. I think this thing of daman or hamala or kafala is one of the best ways of doing this, which I'm not sure if we've done it yet, but we'll probably cover that in time. And that is when somebody stands as a guarantor of another person and says, look, if he does not pay, if I come to you and I buy your house from you and say, I'm going to pay you £1,000 for it next month, and then you say to me, well, if you buy it from me, I want you to get a guarantor who will guarantee it, then that is a way of ensuring trust, because you're going to choose a guarantor that you know and trust. So that will enable transactions between people who don't necessarily know each other, but they trust somebody that both parties know. Of course, that can result in the person who gave the guarantee having to pay for the house himself and then having to chase up the other guy to get it back eventually. But I mean, if we have wealthy people who have a lot of money that they're not using, this is one way they can help enable mu'amalat amongst ourselves to happen, even when there is some degree of trust lacking because of the modern times in which we live. So he said, وَإِنْ قَالَ, if the guy with whom it is deposited says, ذَهَبَتْ, it disappeared, فَهُوَ مُصَدَّقْ, he's believed, his word is accepted, بِكُلِّ حَالٍ, in every set of circumstances. وَالْعَارِيَ لَا يُصَدَّقْ فِي هَلَاكِهَا. But he says, as for the previous one we were talking about, when somebody borrows something, he is not believed when he says that something has broken down or disappeared, if it is something that was taken out of sight, as I previously said. So he says that's the difference here. There is an essential difference between borrowing something and something being left with you on trust. Of course, when you lend something to somebody, there is a degree of trust there, but it's not the same level of trust because he's come to you and he wants to make use of it. And so you've done him a ma'roof, a good turn. Whereas when somebody's looking after something for you, they are the ones who are doing you a good turn. So it's almost reversed. وَمَنْ تَعَدَّى عَلَى وَدِيعَةٍ ضَمِنَهَا. If you go beyond the limits, if you maltreat something, act towards it, use it in a way that it's not allowed to be used, misuse it, then you are liable, even if it is left with you on trust. So this is the one time where, so for example, if I leave you, let's take the case of my cow. I leave you my cow. I wish I had a cow. We have nice fresh milk and butter and stuff. I leave you my cow. I said, please look after it for me. I'm going away. And then it turns out that I find out that you've been riding the cow to the market every day. And the cow's back broke. Then you would be liable, despite it being an amana. Because one, you shouldn't really use an amana. Sometimes sometimes you are forced to, in order, for example, if something like a horse needs to be ridden regularly, or other thing, a car needs to be driven regularly, or whatever it is, then even as part of the amana, there would be a certain amount of use to it. But if you were to take this car and drive to the north of Scotland with it, rather than simply driving around to ensure that its engine doesn't break, then you would be liable because you're using it, and then it breaks down. So وَمَنْ تَعَدَّى عَلَى وَدِيعَةٍ ضَمِنَهَا وَإِنْ كَانَتْ دَنَانِيرَ فَرَدَّهَا فِي سِرَّتِهَا ثُمَّ هَلَكَتْ فَقَدْ اخْتُلِفَ فِي تَضْمِينِهِ. So he says, if the deposit was in the form of dinars or dirhams, and he ta'adda, he used them. So, he didn't have, he had some circumstances where he didn't have money of his own. He knew he was looking after these dinars, and he knew he was getting some money back in a few weeks. So he said, right, well, I'll just take it and use this now to cover what I need. And then he says here, and then he puts there back the like of those dinars, say 10 dinars, they were given to him in a purse. He takes them out, uses them, and then returns 10 dinars to that purse after that. And then after he has returned them to that purse, these separate dinars, they vanish. Somebody steals them from him or whatever might happen. Then he says here there's a difference of opinion about whether he's liable or not. Some people say he is because he used them and he shouldn't have used them. But others say, well, no, because he's returned them to their original form, even though it's not exactly the same dinar. So as an ameen, he's not liable. So he said there are some circumstances where if those circumstances come, you should go to the qadi to find out what the ruling is in that specific set of circumstances. That qadi may take one position or may take the other. So there is a difference of opinion allowed in certain instances. The mashhur of the madhab, which is from Ibn al-Qasim, is that he's not liable because he's put it back to the original state. وَمَنِ اتَّجَرَ بِوَدِيعَةٍ فَذَلِكَ مَكْرُوهٌ. So if I give you something like a cow or like a herd of sheep, and then you sell some of those sheep and then buy other sheep back, so you keep it like pretty constant, and then you use it for your own trade. You've been looking after them for a long time and you trade with it. He says here that's disliked. Not completely forbidden, but it's disliked. وَالرِّبْحُ لَهُ, and you get the profit. So if somebody leaves a herd of sheep with you and you buy and sell them and return them to their original amount, and in the process of that you gain 3 or 4 sheep, not being born from the sheep that are there, that's a separate thing. That's part and parcel of them. But you're able to buy more sheep from the ones you sold. Or you're given dinars and you buy some stuff with the dinars and sell it and you have more dinars than you originally had. That profit is yours because you did the work, even though you've done something disliked. But the recommendation he mentions here, according to one of the scholars, they say it was Ashhab, is that you give that to as sadaqah rather than keeping it for yourself. But it's permitted to keep it for yourself.
It would have to be like for like, because obviously some animals could be sick or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If somebody leaves something with you.
Yeah.
But I mean, it depends how long the person leaves them with you. I mean, if he leaves animals with you for 20 years, obviously in that period of time, some of those animals might well have died. So, I mean, it's not always possible. But if he left a certain number of sheep with you, if they died on their own, you're not culpable. But you look after them to the best that you can. And if you are going to engage with them and sell them, then you have to return them to the same amount. But if you're just looking after them and they die, you're not culpable. So long as you've done the minimum that's required of you as somebody who looks after these things. No, the profit from work goes to the worker. I mean, if he is using these things and then he makes profit from them, but obviously it's almost a bit like a qirad in that you have to return the original amount at the very least. But it's a qirad without permission in a sense, and also it's a qirad with sheep would be with goods, because even with the Maliki madhab you're only allowed to do qirad with money. But I mean, the worker, unless you made an agreement in advance, like with qirad, to share the profit. The person who does the work with something is the one who derives the profit from that thing, like with a company and so on and so on. Generally speaking, profit is linked to both capital and labor. And in this case, the person didn't give it to you as capital. You're the only person who's doing work and not on the assumption that it's capital. He says here, وَالرِّبْحُ لَهُ إِنْ كَانَتْ عَيْنًا. So if the profit is in the form of gold or silver, then the profit is yours, basically. So if you make a profit from your trade, then it's yours. وَإِنْ بَاعَ الْوَضِيعَ وَهِيَ عَرْضٌ فَرَبُّهَا مُخَيَّرٌ فِي الثَّمَنِ. If you are given something which is not cash, car, whatever it is, and you sell that car, you may do it for a noble reason. You may think, that the value of this car is quickly diminishing, and so it would be better for him if you sell it. So sometimes you're not doing this because you're trying to make a profit for yourself. You may be doing it for a noble reason. So he says here, if somebody leaves something with you that's not cash and you sell it, he says here, the owner of that thing, when he comes back to collect what it is from you, has a choice. Mukhayyar, he has a choice. He can either take the amount you sold it for, the purchase price. He can take that if he wants. Oh, he can take the value of it on the day that he left it with you. Or no, not on the day he left it, sorry, the day that you did what you did in selling it. So,
like, what if he says, like, don't sell it? Can he say that before he gives it to you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like,
yeah, and obviously, then it's even worse because you've given your word and then broken it. But I mean, usually somebody will leave something. Look after this for me. But I mean,
just permitted to do it.
It's disliked.
Disliked.
Makruh. I mean, strongly disliked according to some. But so basically, you can. There is another choice, and that is if the object can still be found. In other words, it hasn't passed the point where it can be returned. So the car has just been sold. You come along, you find that the transaction's just been done. The buyer has not really used it yet or not changed its value by use of it yet. Then you can say, no, I don't want that. I want to take my car back. And then you can you can get the sale cancelled. But that's only if, the value of the car hasn't changed dramatically. I mean, if it happens months later, usually like cars can change their value. Well, maybe it takes years for cars, but some things only takes a few months for their values to change. Then it's too late, because then the value of it on the day that it is being now and the value of it then is totally different. So you're affecting more people by demanding it back at that point. So you only have that option when it is a recent sale. Then we come to another thing in this chapter. He goes through quite a few different smaller points in this chapter. That's what's called laqata in Arabic. Yeah. And that's when you find property that has been lost. So somebody has lost something, maybe on the road or maybe on a journey, often on the Hajj. Most common place where people lose things is on the Hajj. And you find that property. What is the rule when it comes to you finding that property? What do you have to do? That's this particular area that he goes on to. And he mentions here that the most important thing is if you find lost property, that you have to try and get it back to its rightful owner. And this is by announcing it. So basically, the basic way of this is every town has a particular place where people know to go to for lost property. Maybe the mosque, it may be the market, maybe a courthouse, it may be the mayor's house, whatever it might be. There's a place, usually in most towns and villages, where it's known that if you lose something, that's the place to go to. Nowadays, it's a police station, very often. Your job, you don't give it up to the police or whatever. You have to go to that place regularly, sometimes every day if you live close enough by, and go at a time when people would normally come, and then you put up a notice saying, for example, if somebody lost a purse of money, I have found a purse of money. You don't give too many details. Because if you give too many details, any old person could come. So basically what happens is you basically keep it as generic as you can, but people can get some idea that it is their lost property. And then they have to come and then describe what it is that they lost. Because you have a number of people. Somebody might come and say, yeah, my purse was red with a long strap. Somebody else will come, no, I lost a blue purse. Somebody else might come and say, I lost a purse with 10 dinars in it or whatever. So you basically keep it. And then the person who is correct in what he says, that's basically enough of a proof that he knew what you found to get it back. I lost a ram that had a blazon on its forehead and was strongly built, whatever, you have to give some details. So he says, وَمَنْ وَجَدَ لَقَطَةً فَلْيُعَرِّفْهَا سَنَةً. If somebody finds lost property, he should announce it for a year. So it's basically, this is one of the things that you ask, well, if I find some lost property, do I have to take it? Because I mean, it's a lot of work, isn't it? So it's a lot of work. So basically the general rule is that yes, if you are confident that you are trustworthy enough to look after it, and you are sure that, or you're worried that somebody else who is less trustworthy than you will come along and just take it for themselves, then you have to take it. If you are a traveler and you're not confident in your own ability and you're sure that there's loads of other people coming by here, nearly all of them are trustworthy, and one of them lives closer by and can take it, then you don't have to pick it up. But generally speaking, it's incumbent on a person. Property rights are very, very strong in Islam. If anything belongs to somebody, then it should be returned to them. By the way, I was reflecting after today's khutbah on ownership. I mean, ownership is an interesting thing because we have this, we believe that ownership means something is fully ours and we have the right to do whatever we want with it. But if you really examine what ownership is for us and our relationship with our Creator, you will realize that our ownership is very much like the rules relating to something which is borrowed, because we are borrowing it from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we are not allowed to misuse anything that we think we own, because we are answerable to the true owner, the Malik, for what we do to those things. So it's interesting, just ownership is not absolute. Even though between ourselves, there are owners and people who don't own things, and we have to try and return things to the owners at that level, this ownership is sub to, we are mustakhlafina fi. We are Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's khalifas in everything that we own. So even when we own something, we cannot use it outside of the uses that that thing should have in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَلْيُعَرِّفَ سَنَةً بِمَوْضِئٍ يَرْجُ التَّعْرِيفَ بِهَا. In a place where he is hopeful that people will be able to come and find it and recognize it. As I said, that doesn't have to be any particular place. It was usually at the gate of the mosque, in most places in the past. But in tammat sana, if that year comes to an end, وَلَمْ يَأْتِ لَهَا أَحَدٌ, and nobody comes to collect, or nobody comes who can actually describe the thing enough to be able to take it. فَإِنْ شَاءَ حَبَسَهَا, if he likes, he can hold on to it and keep it safe somewhere, but he doesn't have to continue to go every day to announce it. So he can keep it safe somewhere on the off chance that they might come someday. Or he says, وَإِنْ شَاءَ تَصَدَّقَ بِهَا, or he can give it away as sadaqah. So these are the two main things of it. Not keeping it for oneself in either of these things. Although the sadaqah can be to somebody close to you. I suppose you could even give sadaqah to yourself in some senses. But I mean, if you do give it away as sadaqah, he says here, وَضَمِنَهَا لِرَبِّهَا إِنْ جَاءَ, you then become liable for it should the owner ever come. So if, for example, that the thing was some dinars and you spend them all, then when the owner comes and says, look, I dropped my purse of such and such a description with such and such an amount of dinars, they don't have to describe the amount of dinars. I dropped my purse, because a lot of people are not sure how much is in their purses. I dropped my purse in such and such a place or around such and such an area. I heard that you came to the mosque every day and announced it. Do you still have it for me? And then you would say, no, I've spent it. But then you have to give them back to him because he's still the rightful owner of it. But I mean, obviously, depends where you find it. If you find it on the Hajj, it's very unlikely that person will come back, because in the past was a year's journey for many. So if they lost something, that was it. وَإِنْ انْتَفَعَ بِهَا ضَمِنَهَا, and if you benefit from it, so some things you don't really sell, but you may make use of them, like a car or something of that nature, and you use it regularly. As I said, not simply enough to keep it sound, but you start using it as your own, and that results in something happening to it, even in simply its value decreasing. You are liable should he turn up.
When you say announce it for a year, do you just mean regularly, or?
Yeah, well, as I said, they mention if you can, daily. If it's difficult, daily, because you live far enough away, then it might be weekly. or it could be monthly, but it has to be enough that it gives the person a chance, because you've got to realize that people are not going to come regularly. And if you are going to do it irregularly, then you should basically have other people around who can announce when you're going to turn up. So the person may come on a day that you're not there, and somebody says, yeah, so-and-so was here yesterday saying that he found a wallet. He's coming back next month. I mean, I suppose they could direct you to where you live, or they could tell you the date that you're coming. So if you are going to do it irregularly, make it a set. وَإِنْ هَلَكَتْ قَبْلَ السَّنَةِ, if the thing perishes before the end of the year, أو بَعْدَهَا, or after the year is ended, بِغَيْرِ تَحْرِيكٍ, without you having done anything to make that happen, without you having, as I said, you may have driven it and simply to look after it and it broke down, then you're not liable. But without you using it misusing it, mishandling it, لَمْ يَضْمَنْهَا, you are not liable. وَإِذَا عَرَفَ طَالِبُهَا الْعِفَاص وَالْوِكَاءَ أَخَذَهَا. So this is now explaining, if the person who comes to claim the property is able to accurately describe what the purse looks like and the strap of the purse, so basically a couple of things relating to it, not just a lucky stab in the dark where, it's a leather purse. That would be very, very common. If he says it's a leather purse and, there was some patterning in its strap. So basically saying, when you can describe it in a way that's convincing, and sometimes you can add the amount and other things, but he has to give a couple of details, not just one random detail that can be guessed, then he takes it. Otherwise, if a couple of people come and they both describe one, then you basically have to go to oaths. People have to then swear oaths to see who gets it. And I mean, often when it is vague, they are required to swear an oath as well. Sometimes also one can provide evidence and one can simply make a claim that accurately describes it. Somebody can bring witnesses, then even if somebody else has a more compelling description, the witnesses are proof that take precedence. وَلَا يَأْخُذُ الرَّجُلُ ضَالَّةَ الْإِبِلِ مِنَ الصَّحْرَاءِ. So we now come to animals. When you find animals outside of a city, maybe not on the main roads either, somewhere out in the wild, what do you do? So he says here, if you find a camel that has run off from its owner, it's clearly a domestic camel, maybe it's got a marking or something like that. He says here, you don't take it. You leave it where it is, and then you go and tell people in the nearest village, I saw a camel in that particular place. Because camels have the ability to look after themselves in that area. You're taking on responsibility for yourself and some element of potentially liability that you don't need to do. Also, it's not sometimes when you're trying to get it, you could harm this animal. So it's better, he says, when it's something like a camel, to leave it where it is. Provided, of course, that there are no thieves in the area that you're worried about, or, I mean, even if there are, wild animals like there are in most areas of Sahara, camels are usually equipped to protect themselves somewhat. But if it's something else like a sheep or something he's going to come to, it's not quite so able to look after itself in the wild. وَلَهُ أَخْذُ الشَّاةِ. He has the right to take a sheep or a goat. Shat applies to both of these creatures, small domesticated animals. وَأَكْلُهَا. And he has the right to eat it. إِنْ كَانَتْ بِفَيْفَاء, if it is out in the desert. Not if it is close to a city limits and it's clearly marked, in which case, if it's not too much hassle, then he has to take it to this nearby area. But if it's a long way out, then he's not required to make a big, huge detour. It's there now. It's gone. You don't have to worry about stealing somebody's property. Basically, it almost has the classification now of a wild animal, and it's all the way out there. So you're allowed to eat it. La imarata fiha. So when there's no built-up zone close by. So he's basically saying there's a different ruling for camels to these other But cows, there's a difference of opinion because they're quite big, for one, and it's quite a loss for somebody. But also they're not so equipped to look after themselves out in the wild. So some people take the position that even if it's a bit of a detour, if it's a cow, you should take it and make sure it's that you have taken it somewhere where people might know where it is. There's one other category he hasn't mentioned here that is sometimes found or was found in the past. I don't know if you can guess what that is. We call them in English foundlings. Children. So sometimes people would have children, and some people were not equipped to be parents, and they would abandon the children, sometimes in places where they could easily be found, or sometimes some people were terrible and just abandoned them regardless. If you find such a child, then you have a responsibility towards that child as if that child was your own. Of course, and that is, you have to feed them and look after them until they reach the age where they no longer require that. Obviously, they are not your child, and so you are making efforts to find their correct parents, but you have to look after them as if they were your own child, basically. You're not allowed to leave them on their own. If you come along a child who's, as a baby, I'll leave it. Unless you absolutely know you have no capacity and you know that there are other people coming along who will be able to look after this child better than you, in which case that's an exception.
So the animal basically regarding account.
So basically, when it comes to animals in the modern world, it's not quite the same thing. If people have these cars where it's actually a short journey to take it back to an area, then it's better if you find a domesticated animal, even a sheep, to take it to that place because it's somebody else's property. But I mean, here it's about, if you find it out in the wild and there's no built up area nearby, it's a lot of effort to take that animal and to transport it. It takes away your time, takes away your effort. In the modern world, not so much. It could take you half an hour only. So, I mean, it depends on the circumstances. He says, وَإِدَاءُ قِيمَةُ الْمُسْتَهْلَكِ. So he says here, وَمَنِ اسْتَهْلَكَ عَرْضًا. If you have something that does not belong to you, and you consume it, eat it, use it up, make use of it until it no longer has any capacity to be used for anything else, then you have to provide the owner with its value. You have to pay the owner its value. This is for items that have value. I mean, because the prices of things are, or the worth of things is dependent upon different types of things. For example, the worth of money is the count of that money. So 10 dinars is worth 10 dinars. You have to give the exact same amount as the money. So if I spend 10 dinars, I have to give back 10 dinars. I can't say those 10 dinars were worth such and such an amount of, because their gold had such impurity. No, it's dinars. If it's wheat, then or dates, and I eat all of that wheat and dates, then again, we don't go about the value. Maybe the value of wheat in 1 year is 110 dinars, and then the next year for a ton, then the next year it's 9 dinars for a ton. I don't give the value of that wheat. I simply give the same amount of wheat that I ate. So when he's talking about value here, he's talking about things which are purely sold upon their value, like slaves, animals, paintings, houses. They're you don't give a house like it. you work out what it's worth. So the price is dependent upon its value. So that's when he says you have to pay its value. That's for things of that type. He says, وَكُلُّ مَا يُوزَنُ أَوْ يُكَالْ فَعَلَيْهِ مِثْلُهُ. But if something is sold by weight or by measure, or he doesn't mention here by number, then you have to give back the same weight, measure, or number that you took and you used up. And it doesn't matter if you consumed it yourself, or you gave it to somebody to be consumed, or you put it somewhere where you knew it was likely to be consumed. For example, you borrowed a sheep, and then you left it outside in a place where you knew that wolves were going to come and get it. You're liable in all those ones, even if you didn't eat it yourself. You have to replace this value. Then there's one more section he mentions in this, the final part of this particular chapter before we move on to ahkam ad-dima, which are rulings relating to blood, injuries in other words, and hudud, punishments, which is the next chapter after this. There's one more section which actually has a place in the next section, even though it's not got a specific had punishment, which is called ghasb. So when you take somebody else's property, you either take it surreptitiously, you sneak there and you take it from them, you steal it from them, which is in Arabic is called sariqah. وَالسَّارِقُ وَسَارِقَةُ فَاقْطَعُوا أَيْدِيَهُمَا. When the sariq cut off their hands, that's stealing. But there are other ways of taking a person's property, one of which is called ghasb, which is when you take it openly because you are stronger than them, or you have more might behind you, or they're scared of you, or whatever. So you just come and usurp it or confiscate it from them and make use of it for yourself. This does not have the same ruling as sariqah. If you do that, you don't get your hands chopped off. But there is ta'zir, there is another type of punishment to, deter people from doing this. In fact, most punishments in the deen, the purpose of them is twofold. Number one, as a deterrent. Number two, as an expiation for the person who did it. So by doing it, you're, as we're going to come to in the next section, you are receiving that punishment in this dunya, you are spared the punishment in the next. And by having the punishment public, you deter both that person from doing it again. He's lost a hand. He knows he might lose another one next time from stealing, or anybody else who might be considering doing that particular act. But ghasb does not have a specific had punishment, but it does have deterrents that are done to people who do it in order to deter other people from doing it. But what happens when you take somebody's property from them by force? You're obviously not in a position of trust. If I've taken your car and says, no, I'm using your car, you can't have it anymore. It's mine now. I'm taking it. Then he says here, he's dhamin lima ghasab. He is liable for anything that happens to that car now. Even things that are determined as acts of God, you are liable because you took it from that person. فَإِنْ رَدَّ ذَلِكَ بِحَالَةٍ فَلَا شَيْءَ عَلَيْهِ. If you return the thing in the exact same condition as when you took it, you are not financially liable to him. But if it's not in the same condition, then you are. In other words, if it has deteriorated during your... That doesn't, by the way, فَلَا شَيْءَ عَلَيْهِ, there's nothing on him, doesn't mean that he doesn't get punished by the qadi. That's a separate matter. We're talking about towards the person usurped, the person from whom you took it. وَإِن تَغَيَّرَ فِي يَدِهِ. If the thing you took from that person, let's say a car, has changed during the time that you have confiscated it and made use of it for yourself, فَرَبُّهُ, the owner of it, مُخَيَّرٌ, has the choice بَيْنَ أَخْذِهِ بِنَقْصِهِ, taking it back from you in its diminished state, and obviously taking some reparations for what you've done to it, أو تضمينه القيمة, or requiring you to pay the full value of it and it's not yours now. Because maybe he doesn't want it now in its changed state. I mean, it was only worth it to him when it was a horse that could win races. Now it's an old nag. I mean, he has no need for it. So basically, however much it was worth when the guy took it, he can say, look, I want that, and I can buy another one. I don't want this thing back. It's no use to me anymore. وَلَوْ كَانَ النَّقْصُ بِتَعَدِّيهِ And this is when it changes without the person having done anything wrong. He took it, left it, fed it, but during that time it got ill. Say a horse. During that time it got ill and it wasn't as strong as before. Or he took it from you without your permission, left it in his garage, and then something happened to the engine or whatever. Some insects came along and bit through the cords or whatever it is, and its value changed. That's this particular thing. He says, if you actually did something to it after you took it that harmed it, he says here, وَلَوْ كَانَ النَّقْصُ بِتَعَدِّيهِ خُيِّرَ أَيْضًا فِي أَخْذِهِ وَأَخْذِ مَا نَقَص. He's also given the choice between taking it and taking the amount by which it is decreased. So you can take it and take compensation as well. So he's adding this one. So in the previous one, he says basically you have two choices. So I made a mistake in the first one. Basically, he was saying in the first instance, when he didn't do anything specific to it himself, you can either take it in its diminished state or require him to give you the value. In this one, when he has effected the change, then there's a third choice, which you take it and you take compensation. So these are the basic three choices. Obviously, you're not going to take the first choice in the second instance. Your choice now is between either taking the value or taking the compensation plus the thing back. وَقَدْ اخْتُلِفَ فِي ذَلِكَ. There is a difference of opinion about this. In other words, whether this only applies when he has damaged it, or whether it applies across the board, that you have this particular choice. وَلَا غُلَّ لِلْغَاصِبِ. So this is another difference between somebody who you leave something with for them to look after. For example, if I leave you my house to look after for me, and then you rent it out while you've got it, that ghulla is yours. Or if I give you my my cow and you milk it and you take the milk from it and turn it into cheese, that's yours. He says here, but with a ghasib, no. They don't get any of that. It's not theirs by right, because they didn't have the right to use the thing in the first place. So وَلَا غُلَّ لِلْغَاسِبِ وَيَرُدُّ مَا أَكَلَ مِنْ غُلَّةٍ. And they have to, if they basically, for example, milked it and drank all of that milk, then you have to value the milk that they drank, and he has to pay that back. Everything that he took. Or if it was a tree and he took the dates from the tree and ate them, he has to pay back the value of those dates, or the dates themselves. If he uses it or made use of it, or intafa'a bihi. وَعَلَيْهِ الْحَدِّ. In what? So this is a separate issue. He has to be punished for the act of ghasb. But then, what if the thing that he usurped and took as his own, even though it didn't belong to him, was a slave woman? So in the deen, a man is permitted to have sexual intercourse with two categories of women. Number one, women to whom he is married. Number two, women who he himself owns, and there is no other owner but him. Yes? So this person who took this slave woman and is basically using this slave woman as if she's his own. There are limits, even in this. He says, even though he's stolen her for all effects, basically usurped her for his own, if he acts and lies with this woman as if she is his own, he is given the had punishment for zina. If he has intercourse with this slave woman, because it wasn't hers, it wasn't his. So basically, you cannot say, well, I'm using it as my own, so I can do it. He says, no, you get the had punishment for zina for doing this. So he says here, in wati'ah, if he has sexual intercourse with the slave woman that he has usurped, that slave woman, number one, he gets the had punishment. Number two, any children that she has are slaves, even though he's free. Because generally the rule is, if a free man has intercourse with a slave woman, any children that slave woman has are free. He says here, no, not in this case. those children, even though they're children of his, they're given back to the owner of the slave woman, and they become his slaves. So he says here, وَوَلَدُهُ رَقِيقٌ لِرَبِّ الْأَمَةِ, and the slave women, and the children are slaves of the owner of the slave woman. No, the had will be on him. Yes, slave women anyway. Their had for zina is less, but a slave woman in this particular circumstance that maybe doesn't even know the rule. He's the one who's acting towards her. The had punishment will depend on whether he has been married or not, whether he's muhsan or not. If he's muhsan, then he will be killed. If he's somebody who has been married or is married and had a consummated marriage. If he is somebody who is never married, then it would be lashes, 100 lashes. ولا يطيب لغاصب المال ربحه حتى يرد رأس المال على ربه. So he says here, now we have a different thing. If you take some money, you take something from somebody and you buy and sell it and you earn a profit. He says here, generally speaking now, profit is different from ghulla. Ghulla is something that comes out of the thing that you've taken, specifically, like rent from a house, or dates from a tree, or milk from a cow. But if you buy and sell with something, you've now done the work. So profit would then be yours. But he's saying here, but it's not lawful for you to take any of that profit until you've returned the capital to its rightful owner. So it's not profit until the capital is back in the hands. Because you could spend the profit and then some of the capital will disappear and say you're not able to return the full capital. It's the same with qirad. A person cannot take his share of the profit, the worker, until he returns the capital to the capital provider. حتى يرد رأس المال على ربه, until he returns what he took from its owner back to him. ولو تصدق بالربح كان أحب إلى بعض أصحاب مالك. And if he gives away that profit that he took, some of the companions of Malik preferred that. In other words, it's better for him to give it away as sadaqah. That was Ashab. وفي باب الأقضية شيء من هذا المعنى. And he says here, when we come into the chapter that deals with judgments, we are going to go into a bit more detail and some of the other rulings relating to ghasab and the consequences of taking people's property without their permission. So we'll finish there. If there are any questions, because that brings us into the chapter that talks about blood injuries or injuries, specifically killing. Well, there are lots of these situations. Yeah, I mean, that's why I say that having qadis, even a local level, is a fard kifaya on the Muslims. It's an obligation. And I mean, even now, when we don't have people who can exercise the judgments that they give, that doesn't stop us from still having to make those judgments in our communities. Because, I mean, they may return a time where those judgments can be executed. So we should at least still have qadis. It's a fard on us as communities to have our own qadis. We've talked about amirs for a long time. Having people capable of judgments, which were often the amirs in the past, but now the roles have been separated, is also incumbent upon us. We need to do this. And you'll see that as soon as we do that and people realize that at least the true nature of their transactions will be revealed publicly, then it will actually start giving people trust in each other as well a bit more.
If you are in charge of somebody,
yeah.
When it's this refusal to take it back.
Well, if there is a refusal to take it back, then that, in a sense, is an action of them giving it to you. So it depends on the circumstances of that. You'd have to know the exact circumstances. Maybe he's simply refusing to take it now because he can't keep it safe. Then that's a request from him for you to look after it for a bit longer. Or if he's people have to be clear about things. With respect to him dying before he takes it back, it goes to his children or any heirs that he has.
What not take back?
when someone phone the money, for example,
Yes.
figure and he find the owner, bring it back. It is something that's a recompensation for the man who
A finder's fee you're talking about.
They spoke about 10% from this.
No. Only if the person hired you to do that. Then that's a separate thing. If somebody says, I've lost something, my job, I'm hiring you to go and find that. And if you find it, I will pay you such and such an amount. Then yes. But if you find something
You give,
and you look after somebody, you have no right to any of it.
no, I mean, you give him that.
Yeah. And he can do it. He can give it to you as out of generosity if he wants.
This,
But he has no obligation to give you any of the amount that you found. None. It's not yours. You're simply doing a service for him
Yeah.
because this is something that we do in a community of people where there is trust among the people. For example, I've had situations, I think it was in Morocco, I went to a market, I took out my wallet to buy something and put my wallet down and completely left it, forgot about it. Then I went back to the train station and realized, oh my God, I can't afford my train ticket. Where's my money? So I went back to this market. It was completely out in the open. I found it in exactly the spot where I put it. This was in Rabat. You could see the money out coming out of the wallet. It wasn't that much. And it was just there in the same spot that I left it. So, I mean, that sort of thing is something, when people find things now, we don't have expectations simply because we've done something that something of it belongs to us. We have a duty towards other people in this community.
because I heard that, but he has to give you, if you give him back his money, this sum, because you have a right 10% from.
Not in the deen, but maybe in modern lingo they do this, but it's not something. No, there may, as I said, it depends whether you've been hired to look for something belonging to somebody. In which case, yes, there might be something in it, but not when you simply find it. Anything else, or we should finish there because it's Maghrib, I think. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين الحمد لله رب العالمين السلام عليكم